welcome to Chemistry with Mrs. Bennett. I am working on Sig Figs. We just did a video on determining numbers of Sig Figs in a very easy, student-friendly manner. So what we're going to work on today, or right now, is we're going to work on how do we use those Sig Fig numbers with math. So what is the mathematical implication, and how is that going to apply to me in chemistry? So in chemistry, whenever we do any kind of math, we always have to use the proper number of sig figs. When? Always. All the time? Yes. So that's really important. So where do sig figs come from? They come from your given information. So when you are doing a math problem, which we do quite a bit of in chemistry, or if we're doing some type of calculation, it's going to be multiply, divide, add, and subtract. So those are the four functions that I'm talking about. So whenever we do any kind of math, we are going to look at our knowns, our known values, and this is what is given to you in a problem. You don't have to guess. It's given to you in the problem. There's nothing for you to figure out. But first thing you have to do when you are looking at your knowns is determine how many sig figs each one of them has. So that's the previous video that I did. So you have to do this down here. How many sig figs does each number have? You should have at least two numbers in order to do a math function with them. So you have multiply and divide, which are going to have one set of rules. And you're going to have add, subtract, which have a second set of rules. If I'm being totally honest with you, the multiply divide is going to be the one that you use the most. But you do need to know the rules, excuse me, for add, subtract. All right, so let's do the multiply divide. All right, so the multiply divide rule with sig figs is this. So it's pretty simple. All it is you, number one, determine your sig figs. I'm going to abbreviate sig figs. Determine your sig figs for each number that is known. Step two, perform the math function. Whatever, multiply or divide, whichever one. And then step three, when you write your answer, your calculator will give you an answer. And sometimes your answer's got like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 decimal places on it. You are more than likely not going to need that much. So your answer will have the lowest number of sig figs from step number one. So from whatever when you determined how many sig figs you had in your knowns, that's how many you would write your answer with. So let me give you an example, or a couple examples actually, because this one you're going to use a good bit. All right, so let's say we're doing something crazy, like we have 17.362, and we're going to multiply that by 0.0000102. Okay, that's some crazy number. I have no idea what that is, so we got to type it in the calculator. All right, so, well, actually, before we type in the calculator, excuse me, let's do our sig figs. So the 17.362, well, guess what? They're all significant because there are no zeros, so you don't even have to worry about it. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are 5 sig figs in that number. And then the second number has a bunch of zeros. So I have a decimal point, which means I start on the left-hand side of my number, and I will start moving from left to right. And I will not start drawing my ray until I hit my first non-zero number, which is the 1. So this guy has 3 sig figs. All right, so I did step number 1. Check. I determined the number of sig figs for each of my numbers that are known. Now I'm going to do the math. 17.362 times 0.0000, making sure I put in the right number of zeros. Yes, 102. Now, if you're doing this with me, your calculator says, like my calculator anyway, says this. Yours should hopefully say the same thing. Or I put something in the calculator wrong. 17709. This is what my calculator says. I have no idea what your math teacher tells you to do with this. They may specify so many decimal places or something like that. But for you, you have to, in chemistry, figure out what you need to do by looking at step number 3. So your answer will have the lowest number of sig figs from step number 1. All right, well, my step number 1 sig figs were 5 and 3. So this is my winner, meaning, hello, I have to have 3 sig figs in my answer. So I need to write this number with 3 sig figs. Well, let's see how many it currently has. I have a decimal point. That means I start on the left-hand side, and I go from left to right. The zeros do not count. Right here is where I start counting. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are currently 5 sig figs. That is not okay because I need to write this number with 3. So, because I'm trying to not get this too jumbly, I'm going to rewrite my number. Okay, so we know by looking at this right here that the zeros are not significant. So what I need to look at are my 17709. So this is going to be sig fig number 1, because remember we're going from left to right. Sig fig number 1, sig fig number 2, sig fig number 3. So this needs to go away. Now, as always, you have to look back one and only one space, not 2, not 3, not 4, one and only one. Look back one space, goodness, and see if that number needs to round the number in front of it up. This is a 0, so it's not going to round anything up. 5 and above will round the number in front of it up, so it's just going to go away. So when I rewrite this number, it's 0.000177. And that's my answer. Okay, let's do one more really quick. Example 2. How about 32.15 divided by 0.014. So I'd add another number. So 32.15 divided by 0.0142. All right, step 1, determine the sig figs for each number that is known. Well, I know these two numbers, so let's go get their sig figs. The first one, 4. And the second one, zeros are involved. Get on the left because we have a decimal point. The first 2 zeros don't count. These 3 do. You can automatically, right now, go ahead and determine step 3. You're going to have 3 sig figs in your answer. All right, so let's do the math. So 32.15 divided by this tiny little decimal. It's going to make it a big number. All right, so my calculator says 2,264 and 0.8451. All right, that's a crazy number. It's really big. However, I cannot use all of those digits. I can only have 3 sig figs. So I have to write this number with 3 sig figs. Well, there's a decimal point. So first things first, let's figure out how many sig figs we have. Start on the left. The first number is a 2. They're all significant. So this one has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 sig figs. Okay, that's not good because I only am allowed to write this number with 3. Okay, so when I am looking at that, let's clear off some of these dots. Okay, I need to write this number with only 3. So when I'm looking at this, get on the left-hand side of your number. 1, 2, 3. Look back 1 space. Does a 4 round a 6 up to a 7? Or does the 4 just go away? And the answer is 4 just goes away. So just basic rounding rules. Just like in math, if it was a 5, it would round the 6 up to a 7, but it's not. Now this number is 2,264. Everybody has to keep their place values. So this 2 is still in a 1,000 spot. This 2 is going to be in the 100 spot. 6 is in the 10. Now the 4 has to go away because I can't have 4 significant figures. So the answer is 0. Do not put a decimal point. If you put a decimal point, that means the 0 is significant. And if you don't understand that, let's just do that really quick. The difference between these two numbers. The first number does not have a decimal, so we start on the right. The 0 does not count. We block it off, and there are 3 sig figs. For the other number, it has a decimal, so we start on the left, the 2, and there are 4 sig figs. So you have to think about that. Do I need a decimal or do I not? So a common misconception or mishap that happens, and if you really stop and think about it, I know you know not to do this, but kids do it all the time just because they're not thinking. This number up here, let me get my highlighter, is 2,264.08451. So the most common misconception that kids do is they know they need 3 sig figs, so they say, oh, 226. That's my answer. No, think about it. Does 2,264 round, because basically what we're doing is rounding, does it round to 226? No, it does not. But 2,264, if I'm only allowed to have 3 sig figs, does round to 2,260. And so that's why your answer is 2,260 with no decimal point. Okay? Now that's math with multiply divide with sig figs. So let's do the add subtract rule and then we'll be done. All right, so for add subtract, which again, like I said, you will use it at the beginning of the year, but honestly, most of what we do later is a lot of multiply divide. But with add subtract, you don't need to determine the sig figs for every number. It doesn't work that way. First thing you're going to do is perform the math function. And step number 2, you're not actually looking at total sig figs or sig figs of each number. You're looking at decimal places. So when you're doing addition and subtraction, you are going to write your answer with the smallest number of decimal places. From your original or your known numbers. Okay, so let me give you a couple of examples with that. Again, this one's not super hard. It's just not very used that much. Not very used that much. Not used that much for us. All right, so first example, let's say I have 10.140. And I'm going to add it to 7.0000532. All right, so when I add these up, line your decimal places up. So I have 17 point, that's going to be 140532. All right, perfect. However, that's a mighty big number. And in order for me to do my proper sig figs for this, I got to look at these decimal places. So the first number has 3 decimal places. And the second number has 1, 2, 3, 6 decimal places. So I have to go with the smallest number, 3. So that part's the same. You go with the smallest number. And in this case, it's going to be 3. So it's 1, 2, 3. So my number, now the numbers to the left of the decimal, they stay. They don't really have anything to do with it. 1, 4. Now what I'm going to do is I've got to get rid of everything past the 0. But just like before, I have to look back 1 space and to see if that number is going to round the previous number up. Well, that's a 5. So 5 will round the 0 up to a 1. Oops, should have done the other color. 1. And that's your answer. That's it. All right, thank you. Have a good day.